On the very day her father disowned her at MIT graduation, Annalise Vance stunned the world. The girl once dismissed as too soft announced Aegis Dynamics' $1.6 billion IPO, shattering her family's legacy of doubt. In one moment, she transformed rejection into reckoning, forcing the patriarch who denied her crown to watch her forge one in fire. This is not just a success story. It's an indictment written in gold. Annalise Vance is my name. In 15 fateful minutes on my 28th birthday, I stood in the abyss of Tartarus and on the summit of Olympus at the same time. I am the CEO and chief architect of Aegis Dynamics, a cybersecurity stronghold that I built in a small Cambridge dorm room out of the ashes of cold pizza boxes, restless nights, and millions of lines of hurriedly written code. I constructed it during a time when everyone, especially my father, Sir Alistair Vance, urged me to pursue a more realistic career, a term that, in his world, meant getting married well and running a wealthy household. I graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, today, a day that ought to have marked the end of 5 years of unrelenting hardship, the approval of each sacrifice, coffee drop, and sleep-deprived hour. Sitting in the audience, my family, the Vance clan, was the epitome of grudging support. Sir Alistair, my father, sat there looking like a king touring a provincial outpost, his face displaying a mix of duty to his family and a sophisticated contempt for an academic world that he felt was disconnected from reality. With her hands twitching in her lap, my mother, Amelia, appeared poised but nervous. William and Edward, my 2 elder brothers, stood by him like obedient guardians, their faces pale reflections of our father's arrogance. The phone that was tucked inside the billowing sleeve of my gown vibrated as the ceremony got underway, and the clichés about the future and potential continued to ramble on. Not once, twice. My father sent me an icy dagger as the first message, specifically designed to cut the final thread that tied me to the Vance name. It was more than just a text. It was a formal disavowal written in legalese and open contempt, a forwarded email from the family solicitor. The second message, just a few short minutes later, didn't just change my life, it revalued it, with a number followed by 9 zeros. If you're reading this, pour yourself something strong. You're not just about to witness a journey of turning familial rejection into the leverage for a $1 billion IPO. This isn't a success story, it's an indictment, a reckoning written in the language of equity and market caps. This is the story of how I proved that a true crown isn't inherited, but forged in the fires of contempt. In kingdom for princes, not for princesses. My father, Sir Alistair Vance, was a titan of the industry, a self-made man with an iron fist and a heart devoted to patriarchal tradition. To him, tradition meant his sons William and Edward would inherit the throne. I, Annalise, was a beautiful ornament, an investment in a strategic marriage, someone educated to grace the society pages, not the financial pages of the Financial Times. "Business is a bloody battlefield, Anna," he would often say during tedious Sunday dinners, his large hand clapping William, the heir apparent, on the shoulder. "You need a killer instinct to know when to drive the final knife into a competitor's back." His gaze would then slide to me, deceptively gentle but laced with unconcealed dismissal. "You have your mother's heart, too soft for a world of sharks." My brothers weren't malicious. They were simply products of our father's mold. William, 5 years my senior, possessed our father's arrogant confidence, viewing his inheritance as a law of nature, as certain as the sun rising in the east. He saw my fascination with computers as a harmless, childish hobby, something to keep me busy until a suitable husband was found. Edward, the quieter one, 2 years William's junior, would sometimes look at me with a fleeting flicker of sympathy, but his loyalty to our father and his fear of being marginalized kept him silent. He was an accomplice by his silence. My natural aptitude for numbers and machine logic was an inconvenience, an annoying deviation in my father's tangible world of cargo ships, warehouses, and contracts signed in ink on paper. At 16, I spent a summer writing an algorithm to optimize shipping routes for a national science fair. I used anonymized data from a small company as a model. If applied to Vance Global, it could have saved millions of pounds a year by reducing fuel costs and transit times. I proudly presented it to my father in his oak-paneled study, where the smells of Cuban cigars and old leather mingled. He glanced over the charts and equations with a patronizing smile, as if reviewing a child's drawing. "Clever, darling," he said, handing the papers back to me without getting past the third page. But the real world doesn't work like that. You don't understand the human element, Anna. My drivers, the union relationships, the handshakes in gentlemen's clubs, those things can't be calculated by your machines. Business is an art, not a science. I didn't argue. My silence was mistaken for acceptance, but it was a simmering resentment. Instead of arguing, I poured everything into my studies. Secretly, with the help of a guidance counselor who saw my potential, I applied to MIT. I didn't apply to the business school. I chose computer science and engineering, a field my father considered to be for socially inept nerds. It was a quiet but profound act of rebellion. I arrived, the air in the dining room turned glacial. My mother, Amelia, had opened it by mistake, thinking it was from a British university. Her initial look of joy quickly morphed into horror as she saw the MIT logo. Massachusetts! My father set his silver fork down on his plate with a sharp clank that cut through the silence. What the hell will you do across the Atlantic? Pursue some frivolous hobby? It's the top engineering school in the world, father, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I want to build something. Build, he scoffed, a grating sound. Vances build shipping empires, Annalise, not digital trinkets. Engineering is for men who build things with their hands, who work in factories, not for girls playing with imaginary machines in air-conditioned offices. He rose, walked around the table, and looked down at me. You will fail. You'll be crushed by truly competitive minds, you'll get discouraged, waste 4 precious years, and then what? Come home, tail between your legs, begging for a job? My mother, always the peaceful buffer, tried to intervene. Alistair, please. Perhaps we should give her a chance to explore. Explore what, Amelia? He cut her off harshly. Explore the fact that she doesn't belong in that world? Let her embarrass the family? In the end, a reluctant agreement was reached, like a suspended sentence. My father would pay for the first year's tuition. 1 year, he said, his eyes as sharp as daggers. I want to see straight A's in every subject. I want you working a part-time job to cover all your personal expenses, from books to rent. I want you to feel the price of this independence you crave. And if you falter for even a moment, 1B+, you'll be on the next flight back to London to start learning how to manage a household as you were meant to. The day I left Heathrow, he didn't hug me. He shook my hand, a firm, brief, cold grip. When this tech bubble of yours bursts, he said, his tone as certain as a prophecy, William's personal assistant position will always be open for you. It's a stable job. On the 7-hour flight, watching London shrink below, I didn't cry. Tears were a luxury. Instead, I forged his pain, his contempt, and his prophecy of my failure into a suit of armor. I would never be anyone's assistant. I would build an empire of my own, one he couldn't comprehend, couldn't touch, and eventually couldn't ignore. MIT wasn't a university, it was a crucible. It tested me, broke me, and remade me into a sharper, harder version of myself. I lived on black coffee, 4-hour naps on a sofa, and a burning desire to prove my father wrong. My dorm room quickly became the den of Aegis dynamics. Aegis, the mythological shield of Athena, was my answer to an increasingly vulnerable digital world, a world my father could never understand. With me was a trio of talents I had assembled from different corners of Cambridge. Liam O'Connell, a genius white-hat hacker from Dublin with a shock of unruly hair and a complete disregard for authority, who could crack anything not out of malice but curiosity. Maya Singh, a UX designer who could turn my most complex algorithms into interfaces so beautiful and intuitive a child could use them. And Benjamin Ben Carter, a Harvard business student with the charm of a politician and the ability to sell snow to Eskimos. He was our face and our voice. We won the MIT 100K entrepreneurship competition. That victory didn't just give us $50,000 in seed money, it gave us our first taste of validation. I screenshotted the TechCrunch article about our win and emailed it to my family. My mother called immediately, her voice thick with proud tears. My father replied to the email 2 days later with a single line, no salutation or closing. Don't let university games distract you from your real studies. That dismissal, instead of discouraging me, was pure adrenaline. We worked tirelessly, turning that $50,000 into a working prototype. But then, disaster struck. Our first paying client, a small Boston investment firm, was hit by a devastating ransomware attack. Our algorithm hadn't failed, it had detected and blocked the initial intrusion attempt, but one of their employees, despite the warnings, was duped by a sophisticated phishing email, clicked a malicious link, and threw the doors wide open for the cybercriminals. But in the world of panic and blame, the technical details didn't matter. MIT student startup causes multi-million-dollar data breach, screamed a headline on an influential tech blog. The threatened lawsuit was poised to bury us before we'd even taken flight. Ben's calls to the venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road, who had previously shown interest, became a humiliating series of rejections. I'll never forget that meeting, Ben recounted one evening, throwing his portfolio onto the rickety table in our makeshift office, a space barely larger than a laundry room. This VC, some guy named Chad who looked like he'd stepped out of a J. Crew catalog, didn't even make eye contact. He flipped through our presentation, stopping at the team photo. He pointed at your picture, Anna, and said, "Look, son, the tech seems fine, but no one in their right mind is going to entrust their company's security to a bunch of kids led by a 20-something English girl. Find a male CEO with a beard, preferably ex-military, then call us." Desperation began to seep into the office. The team started to doubt. Liam grew irritable. Maya went quiet. That night I sat alone on the banks of the Charles River, staring at the glittering lights of Boston, and for the first time in years I thought my father might be right. I was a dreamer, a fool who had failed. I called my mother, my voice breaking the moment she answered. "I can't do it, Mom. Dad was right. I've failed." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then I heard her voice, stronger and more resolute. "My life. Listen to me, Annalise. Your father was wrong about the stock market in 1999. He was wrong about Brexit. He was wrong about investing in that Welsh coal mine. And he is wrong about you. Do not, for any reason, prove him right this time, Annalise. Ever." The call was a slap in the face. The next day I put on my best suit, one I'd bought with my part-time earnings, and walked into the offices of Athena Ventures, a rare female-led VC firm in Boston. The founder, a formidable woman named Isabella Rossi, an Italian-American with a silver bob and sharp, dark eyes, listened to my story in silence. She didn't look at my colorful presentation. She looked directly into my eyes, as if trying to measure the strength of my will. When I finished telling her the story about the VC named Chad, she nodded slowly. "They told you that you need a man in the room, didn't they?" she asked, not as a question, but a statement. I nodded, unable to speak, a lump forming in my throat. "They told me the same thing 25 years ago, Isabella said, a wry smile playing on her lips. "So here's what we're going to do. I'm investing $750,000 for a 15% stake in Aegis. I'm going to introduce you to my lawyer, who eats corporations for breakfast and spits out their bones. He will make this lawsuit disappear within a week." She leaned forward, her gaze intense as fire. "And in return, you're going to promise me one thing." "Anything," I whispered. "When you succeed, when you're at the top, you will find another brilliant young woman being dismissed by this world, and you will be the one to open the door for her. Deal?" "Deal," I said, a single tear rolling down my cheek. It wasn't just money, it was validation, it was salvation. Isabella hadn't just handed me a life raft, she'd handed me a sword. Isabella Rossi's investment wasn't just a shield, it was a weapon. The lawsuit was settled quickly and quietly. Aegis Dynamics, reborn from the ashes, began a spectacular rise. We were no longer just selling software, we were selling trust, backed by the formidable name of Athena Ventures. The growth was fast and brutal. We moved from our makeshift office to a sleek, open-plan space in Kendall Square, Boston's tech hub. Our team of 4 grew to 20, then 50, then 100. Every new employee, every new contract was a new weight of responsibility on my shoulders. The pressure was a physical beast, gnawing at me from the inside, manifesting in brutal migraines and chronic insomnia. I hired a seasoned CFO, a woman named Judith Hayes, who was 55 and possessed an unnerving calm. She'd worked for Silicon Valley giants and could read a balance sheet like a novel. "You're burning yourself out, Annalise," Judith told me one evening, finding me asleep at my keyboard at 2 a.m., financial models still glowing on 3 monitors. "You cannot personally write every critical line of code, sit in on every sales call, and review every legal contract." "I have to, Judith," I mumbled, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. "If I don't, who will? If something goes wrong, it's on me." "That's the point," she said gently, placing a cup of chamomile tea on my desk. "If the answer to that question is always you, then you haven't built a company, you've built a sophisticated prison for yourself. Trust the people you hired. They're here because they believe in you. Give them a chance to prove it." Meanwhile, our success attracted bigger sharks. Our largest competitor, a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity giant called Goliath Security, run by a shrewd and ruthless CEO named Marcus Thorne, began an underground campaign against us. They planted anonymous rumors on tech forums about non-existent vulnerabilities in our code. They tried to poach Liam, our chief engineer and technical soul. Liam told me about the lunch Goliath's people had taken him to. They offered double the salary, stock, a company car, Anna. They said you were just a lucky kid, that this bubble was going to burst and that I should jump off a sinking ship. I told them to get lost. He looked at me, his blue eyes fierce with loyalty. "I'm not here for the money, Anna. I'm here because I believe we're building something better." I confronted Thorne at a tech conference in San Francisco. He was tall, smug, and wore a suit so expensive it practically screamed its price tag. "Ms. Vance," he said, a condescending smirk on his face as we crossed paths near the coffee station. I hear your little company is making some noise. It's cute, like watching a puppy try to bark. And I hear Goliath is having trouble innovating, Mr. Thorne, I replied, my voice cool as ice, not betraying a hint of intimidation. Perhaps that's why you have to resort to poaching talent and spreading rumors like a schoolyard bully. Or are you just scared that a girl might have built a better product than you? His smugness vanished, replaced by a flash of cold fury. This valley is a battlefield, little girl, not a playground. Be careful you don't get crushed under the heel of a giant. The war wasn't just external, it simmered within my own family. My brother Edward, the one with a sliver of a conscience, called me secretly. Anna, Dad is going spare, he whispered into the phone, as if afraid of being overheard. He saw the Forbes 30 under 30 piece on you. He spent the whole morning yelling at his brokers about why tech stocks are so irrationally overvalued. Did he say anything about me? I asked, a foolish part of me still hoping for a sliver of pride. There was a pause. He said, the bubble will burst and reality will be a painful slap. He said you're playing a dangerous game with other people's Some news, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. Aegis just signed a comprehensive cybersecurity contract with Sterling Bank. There was a long pause. I could hear his whiskey glass being set down hard on a table. Sterling? Who do you know there? To him, everything was about connections, not product merit. They liked our technology, I said simply. It passed all their penetration tests, outperforming Goliath security. Technology comes and goes, he replied, his voice regaining its usual arrogance. It's all just phantom numbers. What's your profit margin? Are you even profitable yet? We're reinvesting all revenue into growth, I admitted, knowing this was what he wanted to hear. I thought so, he sniffed, his voice dripping with disdain. That's not a real business, Annalise. It's gambling with other people's money. Just make sure you finish that degree. You'll need something solid to fall back on when this little stage play is over. That call was a turning point. I stopped seeking his approval. That thirst had died, and in its place was a cold resolve. I didn't need his approval anymore. I needed his surrender. And there was only one way to get that. Take Aegis public. An IPO would be the irrefutable answer. It would be truth etched onto Wall Street in undeniable numbers, the only language he truly respected. The IPO preparations ran parallel to my final classes at MIT. My academic advisor, Professor Anya Sharma, called me into her office. Annalise, you have more than enough credits to graduate in May, with highest honors. I honestly don't know how you've done it. You're running one of the fastest growing companies on the East Coast, and you're one of my best students. When I told my mother about graduating, she was ecstatic. The whole family will be there, your father too. He wouldn't miss it. The thought of my father being at my graduation, at the very moment we were set to announce the IPO, felt like cosmic orchestration. A final act, a final confrontation, was about to play out on the grandest possible stage. On the morning of my graduation, Boston was bathed in a pale gold light that promised a perfect May day. But in my penthouse apartment overlooking the Charles River, the air was electric, charged with the energy of an approaching storm. At 7 a.m., my private line rang. It was Judith. Her voice, usually so calm and measured, now had a rare urgency, a suppressed excitement. Annalise, the underwriters just called. They're seeing a tsunami of demand from institutional investors. They don't just want to raise the IPO price, they want to raise it significantly. How significant, Judith? I asked, my heart beginning to thud against my ribs. Our conservative models were based on $35 a share, putting our valuation around $900 million. They're now talking about an opening price of $48. Annalise, do you understand what that means? She paused. Unicorn. Will debut with a valuation of nearly $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. The number hung in the air, absurd, abstract. It felt more like a concept in physics than a financial figure. When will we know for sure? The final pricing meeting is at 9 a.m. They'll call back with the final lock before 9:45. The official press release goes out to all the major wire services at 10 a.m. sharp, right as the opening bell rings. My graduation ceremony started at 10 a.m. It was cruelly perfect. I met my family at MIT's Killian Court. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering words of love. My brothers looked awkward in their suits amidst the academic crowd. William gave me a stiff handshake. Edward just nodded, avoiding my gaze. And my father, in his immaculate Savile Row suit, looked out of place and annoyed. Congratulations on crossing the finish line, Annalise, he said, offering his hand. Not a hug, a transaction. I always knew you had the persistence. It was a cleverly disguised compliment. He was praising my stubbornness, not my intellect. As if I had just finished a marathon he never believed I could start. As I walked towards the ranks of graduates, I heard his low, booming voice directed at my brothers, just loud enough for me to hear. Well, at least now she has a piece of paper to frame. It will come in handy when that tech toy company of hers implodes next year. She'll have something to hang on the wall of her rented flat. I slipped on my graduation gown, feeling it was both armor and a shroud. I found my seat among thousands of identically clad students. The vast lawn was filled with hopeful faces and proud families. I glanced at my phone. 10:28 a.m. The ceremony was approaching the engineering department. And then it vibrated. A message from Father. Not a text. A forwarded email from his private solicitor, with a personal note from him at the top. His note read, "Just so you are aware, as of today, all remaining financial arrangements between us, including the small trust your mother set up for you, are officially terminated. You have chosen your path. Do not expect a safety net from me or the Vance family fortune. You are on your own to stand or fall. Good luck." I read it twice, then a third time. The air was sucked from my lungs. This wasn't a warning. It was a formal act of abandonment, written in cold, legal language. On my graduation day, minutes before I walked across the stage, he was cutting the final chord, ensuring that if I fell, I would fall alone and hard. The pain was sharp as broken glass in my chest, a betrayal so bitter it made me nauseous. My name was called. Annalise Grace Vance, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Engineering, with highest honors. Phone buzzed violently. Not a vibration, but a call. It was Judith. I couldn't not answer. I turned my back on the stage, hurried to a secluded corner behind the grandstand, and answered in a whisper. "Judith, I'm in the middle of my graduation. I don't care where you are, Annalise." Her voice was practically a shout, cracking with unrestrained excitement. "It's official. Final price is $50 a share. $50. The press release went out 60 seconds ago. The market is going insane. CNBC, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, they all want an interview with the CEO of Wall Street's newest $1.6 billion unicorn." Her voice boomed in the relative quiet behind the stands. It bounced off the nearby rows. Heads began to turn. A professor in the front row looked at me, then down at his tablet, his eyes widening in astonishment. 1.6 billion? I stammered, my voice no longer a whisper, louder than I realized. "Judith, that's... oh my God." The murmur started, a small ripple at first. "Is that Annalise Vance?" someone whispered. "Vance from Aegis Dynamics?" "As CEO of a public company, you need to make a statement," Judith said, completely unaware of the drama unfolding around me. "We need you at the office ASAP. The world is watching." "I understand," I said, and a cold calm washed over me. I stood up straight, stepped out from my corner, and spoke into the phone, my voice now clear, resonant, and deliberate. "I'll be at headquarters as soon as the ceremony is over to prepare for the interviews. Thank you for the news about our $1.6 billion successful IPO." I enunciated every word. I wanted them to be heard. I wanted them to land like thunder. The murmur became a roar that spread through the audience. Smartphones were pulled out. Faces turned towards me. Hundreds of people were now staring. I lifted my head and looked directly at the family section, where they sat like gods on Olympus. My mother looked utterly bewildered, her hand flying to her mouth. William and Edward looked stunned, as if they'd been struck by lightning. And my father. He stood there, frozen. In one hand was his phone, the screen lit up with what I could only assume was the breaking financial news. His face was ashen, a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief mixed with horror. His eyes traveled mechanically from the phone in his hand to me, the daughter he had just formally disowned, and back to the incomprehensible number on his worldview broadcast live for everyone to see. The degree in my hand was paper, but the indictment I had just delivered was written in gold. The celebratory lunch at Les Balliers, a fine dining restaurant I had booked months in advance, now felt like a hostile board meeting. The air was thick with tension. The appetizers were served but remained untouched. My father was the one to break the silence. He set his crystal glass down so hard that the white wine sloshed over the rim. "You planned all of this," he began, without preamble, his voice low and accusatory. "The theatrics at the ceremony. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone." I slowly placed my linen napkin in my lap, looking him straight in the eye. "No," I said, my voice eerily calm and collected. "I was simply living my life. The timing was a cosmic coincidence. Your email, however, was not. You are on your own to stand or fall. You sent that at 10:28 a.m. The Aegis press release went out at 10 a.m. You'd already seen the news when you sent it, hadn't you?" Silence descended on the table. "Did you really think I was going to fail?" I continued, my voice gaining an edge. "Or were you just trying to land one last punch before I was out of your reach for good? You couldn't stand the thought that I might succeed without you, could you?" My mother took a sharp breath, her eyes welling with tears. "Alistair, she's right. That email? It was cruel. How could you do that to your own daughter on her graduation day?" "I was teaching her a lesson in independence," he thundered, causing the people at the next table to glance over. "That's how the real world works. No safety nets." "No," I cut him off, something I had never dared to do before. "You weren't teaching me about independence. You were trying to assert control at the very moment you felt it slipping away. You've done it my entire life. Business is for men. Tech is a hobby. You'll need something to fall back on. Well, this is what I'm falling back on, Father." I slid my phone across the polished mahogany table. The screen showed the stock price for Aegis Dynamics, ticker AGIS, which was now soaring 30% in after-hours trading. "It's called equity. It's called market capitalization. It's a language I know you understand better than anyone." William, my eldest brother, the ever-loyal copy of our father, looked flustered for the first time. "Dad, you have to admit, this is astounding. 1.6 billion. It took Vance Global 2 generations to reach that." My father turned on his firstborn with a look of betrayal. "You too, William? You're also enchanted by these phantom numbers? Don't you see this is just a bubble?" "It might be a bubble," William conceded, from all sides. He looked at me, his eyes a maelstrom of anger, confusion, and something I had never seen there before. Fear. The fear that the world he knew had changed forever, and he had been left behind. My phone rang. It was Judith. I stood up, smoothing my dress. "Excuse me, a CEO's duties never stop, not even for a family lunch of celebration or recrimination." I looked directly at my father. "I'm sure you understand." I stepped outside to take the call. When I returned, my decision was made. I have to go. CNBC is waiting. Someday, when you've processed this, when you can look at me as a peer and not a disappointment, we can talk again. But that conversation will be on my terms, based on the reality of today, not on the fairy tales of last century's gender roles. I picked up my bag. My mother stood and hugged me. "I am so proud of you, Annalise. Never, ever doubt that." As I stood to leave, my father called out, his voice almost choked, hoarse. "Annalise." I turned, my hand on the doorknob. He looked 10 years older. His iron-clad confidence had melted away, leaving a man who looked lost and tired. "That company, is it really worth that much?" The question wasn't a challenge. It was a concession. For the first time, he was asking, not telling. "The market seems to think so," I said softly, "and the market, as you always taught me, never lies." As I walked out of the restaurant and into the waiting black car, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt a profound stillness, a release. The weight of trying to win a rigged game had been lifted. I wasn't playing his game anymore. I had created my own, and I had won. A year later, I stood on the same stage at MIT, not as a graduate in a gown, but as the keynote speaker in a power suit. Aegis Dynamics had thrived, becoming an undeniable force in the cybersecurity industry. Our stock price had stabilized and grown, silencing any whispers of a bubble. But the accomplishment I was proudest of wasn't a number on a stock ticker. Last year, I told the crowd of bright, hopeful students, I launched the Athena Shield Foundation. Seeded with an initial $50 million from my personal funds, we finance STEM startups founded by women and minorities, the ones who get turned away by traditional VCs for not fitting the pattern. I had kept my promise to Isabella Rossi. I had become the one who opened the door. My relationship speech, as I was leaving the stage to a standing ovation, my phone vibrated. A text from my father. Good speech. You have your mother's idealism, but my ruthless drive. A formidable combination. It was the closest thing to a compliment I had ever received from him, an admission wrapped in his familiar prickly shell. I smiled, a real, unforced smile. I read the message, locked the phone, and put it in my pocket. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I had built my own shield, not against the world, but against his shadow. And finally, from within the fortress I had built with my own hands and mind, I had found not just success, but peace. The only validation that truly mattered, it turned out, was the one I found in the mirror every morning. The Aegis shield didn't just protect data, it had protected my soul. And that was a valuation that could never be priced.